It's known as a ghost island to many around the Purcell's Cove area because of the many people that lay under this island. But it's not just bones that lay under Deadmans Island soil. There is also its history. Deadmans Island is actually a small peninsula off the coast of the Northwest Arm in Halifax. The other day, I decided to walk down and check it out. Not many people know how important it is to care about this small piece of land and its history. As we approach the 200th anniversary of the War of 1812, it is not commonly known that 188 American soldiers that died in the conflict, along with many more French soldiers and Black and Irish immigrants, are all buried here in unmarked graves. Soldiers, merchants, immigrants, this is truly an island of the dead. In 1998, Deadmans Island almost looked like this. A group of developers tried to build a 7-story condominium on the island. But here we are in 2011, and the island still looks as untouched as it did in 1812. Why is that? There are many remains that lay under our city of Halifax. Historical research will help us to pinpoint some of the exact locations of the archaeological remains. It may take a while before they begin to dig up some of these remains, which is fine, as long as they don't disturb any of them in the process. In order to preserve the value of the city of Halifax's archaeological site for the future, we must be aware of what it was worth in the past. Deadmans Island is a key to this search. Although little archaeological exploration has been done in the area, it has been proven as an important candidate for the future of exploration of archaeology in Halifax.
Okay, I'm Iris Shea, and I grew up in Jollymore, which is not too far from Deadmans. I knew a fair amount about Deadmans before it started gaining a lot of publicity, but certainly not as much as what we've learned, since 1998. I attended a public meeting, basically out of just a whim. I thought, oh, I should go to that and see what they have to say. But it was HRM, Halifax Regional Municipality, had called the meeting with the developer, and it was to give the public a chance to ask the developer, what about his plans? What are you planning to do there? And of course, it came up. It was going to be this condominium built on the island, and a lot of the people were from the Melville Cove area and the Deadmans Island area. And they knew that people were buried there. They weren't too sure who they were, and that's how I got involved. I started doing some research, trying to find out, who is buried there.
Go view the graves which prisoners fill, go count them on the rising hill. No monumental marble shows, whose silence dust does there repose. Deadmans Island is often referred to as Melville Island's graveyard. In the 19th century, Melville Island, now known as the Arndale Yacht Club, was a prison. Prisoners kept on the Melville Island prison that died were rowed across the cove and buried on Deadmans Island, which explains the reason behind its name. Many people are buried there, including French, Irish, American, and even some African Americans, all for different reasons.
Well, the War of 1812 to 1814, they died of different diseases, dysentery, you see dysentery, infection. Some of them, who were injured and brought there and had infections. And there was smallpox, other contagious diseases. and some of them died. And so again buried them on Deadmans Island. And it's very important for our history, you know, to commemorate the Americans, because at the time, during the War of 1812, Canada and New England were friends, but it wasn't long before there was some animosity and they were capturing each other's vessels back and forth, and it was too bad. I mean, we're friends now again, which is nice, but at that time, you know, Canada and New England, they became enemies.
During the French Revolution, France was at war with its neighbors in Europe. These wars resumed in 1800 under the leadership of Napoleon Bonaparte, who was crowned French Emperor in 1804. This meant that France was at war with Britain and its colonies, including British North America, Canada, today.
The British bought Melville Island in 1804, but even prior to that, they were leasing some of the buildings that were on Melville Island. They had been owned by businessmen, Mr. Kavanaugh, John Kavanaugh, who owned a cooper shop, and he owned a beautiful red store down on the Halifax waterfront, and he sold a lot of fishing equipment. But he had these large buildings on Melville Island, and so the British rented them or leased them from Kavanaugh, then bought the island in 1804, and at that time they needed prisons for the French, that they were capturing all these French vessels during the Napoleonic Wars, and so they brought the prisoners to Melville Island, and some of them died, and so again buried them on Deadmans Island.
Before Deadman's Island got its name, it was called Target Hill because of naval ships that used to use it for gunnery practice. The first reference to Deadman's Island being used as a burial ground is found in a journal written by the name of Benjamin Palmer.
26th of May, 1814. Latham obtained a parole today. Being unwell, he'd been in the hospital ever since he'd been here. 2 persons have been taken to Target Hill this week. 4th of June, 1814. 3 of the principal officers of the Diomede came in this day. 4 prisoners carried to Target Hill this morning, the place where they buried the dead. I'm fearful a number of us will visit that place this summer, if not shortly released.
Earlier this year, I took a short trip to Deadman's Island on a nice day to get a better sense of its geography. The area is very lush, with large oaks, pines, and maples. The harbor looks bright blue, and it's very quiet. Anyone would be surprised to find out that there was ever any civilization on the peninsula. But believe it or not, there's actually been a lot of settlement on the island. By 1907, Deadman's Island was purchased by Charles Longley. He established cottages, camps, and even an amusement park right on the island. Often, skulls of other human bones were found and kept as souvenirs.
Well, probably after the Irish immigrants came, 1830s, 1840s, we figured perhaps there were burials of the Irish immigrants who died of scurvy and typhoid. But after that, no, I doubt very much if there were any burials on the island after that. It was 1908 that they recognized as when the Canadian Army took over Melville Island. And then you see it's called a detention center. So the Canadians, the Canadian Army, and maybe some of the Navy too, they put their own prisoners in Melville Island. My dad was one of those because he fell asleep while he was on duty, and they put him in, that's the punishment, you go to Melville Island Prison.
Today, Deadmans Island is known for its wildlife and lushness. Children's camps travel there by boat or by a newly made footpath for an adventure up the spooky island and to learn about its history. Deadmans Island has always been important around the area. Presently, the island is being protected with the help of HRM and even the American government. But, as you know, in 1998, Deadmans Island could have just as easily looked like this.
Yes, it went on for quite a while, and we were at times wondering if we would ever preserve it. I had a friend, I had done some research for him, and he lived in Connecticut, and he was very interested in American military events. And when I told him that they wanted to put a condominium on this island, and we're quite sure there are a lot of Americans buried there. I had done some research by the time, well, shortly after the meeting that announced they were thinking of putting a condominium on, and so local organizations, the Northwest Arm Heritage Association reformed, and I sent emails. It was mainly by emails, you know, that we convinced people, Americans, to come on board. We felt that the Americans would be really interested in the fact that there were Americans, especially military people, buried on Deadmans Island. Now, this friend in the U.S. became very vocal. He became very active, and started with the emails first and then the phone calls to just about every organization he could think of in America. Nobody would bite, and finally the War of 1812 Society of Ohio took an interest, and that's what it took really to get HRM sort of on our side, and maybe we better save this island. And by the year 2000, Deadmans was owned by the Halifax Regional Municipality. Yes, well, I think eventually the federal government will recognize it as a national heritage site. It's been applied for once and either turned down or put on hold, and that was probably back like the early 2000s, like maybe 2004, 5, somewhere around there. And now there's another move to have it designated as a National Heritage site, both Melville Island and Deadmans Island. And it should be. And once it is, I think there'll be more interpretation going on. There are some interpretive signs there now, but I think once it becomes a National Heritage Site, you'll see more tourists. What happened here was not known in other parts of Canada. When you read history books, there's never any mention of Halifax being involved or being part of the War of 1812. You don't see that in history books that are used in other parts of Canada, and you don't see that in even the non-fiction that's been written about the War of 1812. And it's a whole new part of history that needs to be added, and has to be known across the country that Halifax played an important role. Nova Scotia played an important role, and what we see is a lot of wealthy Nova Scotians came out of the War of 1812 because, for instance, the Liverpool packet very important in the War of 1812, and a man by the name of Enos Collins. He became a banker in Halifax, but his money came out of Liverpool and the privateers, and he owned not just the Liverpool packet, which was back and forth to New England, capturing New England vessels. And he became wealthy as a result of the War of 1812, Enos Collins, but a lot of other people do, and even just the crew of all these privateers, they got to keep a share of what was the goods that were captured on the American vessels. So that's a part of Nova Scotia history, but it's Canadian history as well. So it's important to get the word out, about Deadmans in Melville Island and the role that they played in the history of Canada.
The unmarked graves of men, women, and children buried on Deadman's Island are now recognized and respected. The French and Spanish sailors of Napoleon's navy, young privateers sailing out of New England ports on their great adventures, former slaves from the southern plantations seeking freedom, and victims of disease from the immigrant ships of the old world are comrades now in death. Their bones, scattered by storm and tide, are finally at rest, and they are remembered here in this peaceful place. This is the entrance to Deadman's Island Park. Not many people know how important it is to care about this little piece of land and its history.
Hold it.
Oh.
Yeah, go, Ed.
Can I start again? Not many people know how okay. Not many people know how much that 188 American soldiers. Why are you frowning at me?
Yes, you're doing that. 188 of it.
Are all buried here in Deadman's Island on unmarked graves.
Right here in Deadman's Island on Deadman's Island in unmarked grave.
On Deadman's Island in unmarked graves. In unmarked graves.
Are all
buried here on Deadman's Island on unmarked. Okay, all buried here on unmarked graves.
are all buried here in. Look at me. Come on.
Here on unmarked graves.
In!
Are all buried here in unmarked graves. But here we are in 2011, and the island is still.
Okay, wait, just a minute.
Halifax Regional
A group of developers More time.
That sucked.